we can also look at it as an iceberg. And I know a lot of people who relate to this very well, because we can sit there and think, well, okay, that kid at the top of the iceberg, what are we seeing? What behaviors do we see? You know, we're only seeing that maybe they're purposefully misbehaving, or they're defiant, or they're attention seeking, lazy, poor parenting, or they're pushing my buttons, or they're being oppositional or avoidant, spoiled, entitled, or a bully. And so, or in another case, you know, we're seeing these behaviors on the surface. What are they telling us? So a lot of the times we really need to dig deep down into that iceberg to see, well, what are these behaviors telling us? What are they showing us? What is the root? What is the need that this child's communicating through their behaviors? You know, they may be ashamed or embarrassed or scared. A lot of these feelings that we need to make sure we can zone in on that emotion and help them with that regulation in order to get them into that state of mind where we can start to think and problem solve and learn. So I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead, and one of the case studies that I pulled up was that the ruckus in the front hallway, that first case study. That you want to give us a little synopsis of that one?
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember, and I'm not going to read the whole story. I'm just going to give you like the brief overview for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, and those who did. I'm not going to read the whole story again. But I remember, you know, as a principal, beginning of the school year, my walkie went off, and I'll tell you, actually, not being a principal anymore, it feels weird. I'm always reaching for that walkie-talkie that hasn't been on my hip in like 6 years, and it went off, and it was my assistant, or my office secretary, calling and saying there's a ruckus in the front hallway. And strangely, you know, my vocabulary, reading and writing was never my strength growing up. I struggled a lot. So I honestly didn't even know what a ruckus was. It might have been the first time I heard that word or paid attention to it. So I also have ADHD, so some combination. And I was excited because I didn't know if a ruckus was, you know, like a birthday gift or something. And I learned really quickly it wasn't. And a ruckus was a little guy ripping the bulletin board off of our wall and knocking tables over and chairs and just, you know, totally out of control. And for those who can't tell, looking at this part of me, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'4" and about 265 pounds. And being an elementary principal, some of these little guys could almost fit in my pocket. So I remember coming, side stance, open palms, trying not to be a threat, always would look around at things to make it look like something else was going on. So it wasn't like all I have to do to get the big guy out here is, you know, create a ruckus apparently. And so the kid turned, looked me, sized me up and said, "What are you looking at? You're fat, bald, and stupid." And I mean, probably wasn't the way I wanted to start the day. And I just looked at him and I said, "You know, you seem to be really upset. What do you need and how can I help you?" And the second time went to, "What are you, deaf too?" I said, "You're fat, bald, and stupid." I said, "Well, it really is obvious that you're not doing so well. How can I help? I mean, like, what do you need, my man?" And the third time he started in and he said, "You're fat, bald, and stupid, and I hate you, and I hate this school, and I don't know where my mom is." And he reached his arms out and I said, "Do you need a hug?" And he did. And, you know, we got him into the office and just let him calm down, gave him something to eat, let him relax, you know, color came back in his face. He started breathing again, which is, you know, really a good thing. And just very briefly, you know, he's like, "Well, can I go get my backpack and whatever?" And I was kind of puzzled. He's like, "Well, I know you're going to send me home like the last school did." And I'm like, "No, we're not really going to do that now. Let's kind of figure out what was going on there. And, you know, what's the plan for the rest of the day? What's it going to look like?" You know, even for adults that I see in therapy, a lot talks about, you know, when anxiety is really high, helping people know what the escape plan is or what's the emergency plan or where can I go when I start feeling a certain way. And he calmed down. The kid apologized. Pretty sure he came back and gave me a hug. And I sent him off to class. And not every story I tell is a happy ending. This happened to be one. I really never had a problem with this guy again. I mean, he's just dysregulated, didn't want to be there, was sad, missed his mom. I'm 48 years old and I miss my mom. I see her once a year. She lives in Phoenix. So just understanding that. And what was really quite interesting about this is, you know, I left out a part, I apologize. He did go back and cleaned up the mess, you know, kind of fixed what he had done, and that restorative model repaired the harm. And during the day, several teachers came and like, Bryan, I can't believe you didn't send this kid home. And my point was, you know, what good would that have done? You know, broadly, suspensions don't work anyway. And, you know, what are we going to do? The kid was dysregulated. He was upset. He's fine now. You know, we'll have him fix the harm he's done, and let's hope maybe he'll learn something. Going home, it was my impression he wasn't going to learn anything. So it's a really interesting thing. I use that a lot in this story, particularly in a lot of the trainings that I do. And you can kind of see the divide between those that are more, you know, punitive, those that are more restorative, those that kind of have a more fixed mindset, those with growth mindset, and just understanding that and trying to get folks to sort of appreciate that. So that's kind of the ruckus in the hallway story. There are some questions that are at the end of every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, I'm happy to share them, or if you want to share the questions, whatever works better, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I did just want to say, we have a friend on here, Carolyn. She said that she loves the child's ability to be able to express himself, even in that difficult situation. So I know that, you know, sometimes in a lot of the, our friends that we see, you know, even being able to have you approach them in a way that is non-threatening and they're able to open up, you gave them that time to be able to express himself. And I'm going to go ahead and move to that slide. So one of the questions you asked at the end of that case study, and what would you have done if you had been in our shoes? So if you want to utilize the chat to go ahead and we can discuss some of the answers to these questions, if that's okay.
And while they're writing that, Kelly, it's important. Something I use a lot is this notion of a window of tolerance. And a lot of the things that are written on that window of tolerance talk specifically about children that have faced trauma or have a high ACE score. I use this with everybody. I use this with clients that are dealing with anxiety or high stress and depression, and just understanding when our window of tolerance is wide open, and a lot has to do with, you know, using self-care, you know, all these great things we can do. And I use it like when I'm at a concert or if I'm at the beach, my window of tolerance is so wide open. You know, a guy bumps into me, it's okay. Look how wide my window's open.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody bumps into me or spills a beer on me, it's okay. You know, it starts drizzling a little bit, that's okay. And just understanding that some of our kids, actually some of our grownups, are coming in, their window of tolerance is either this wide open or it's closed. It takes nothing to set somebody off. So just having that understanding, that concept of the window of tolerance is really important. I don't see anyone yet, and anybody here is free to answer, what would you have done if you'd been in our shoes? You can answer that. You can answer the second question if you want. How would your colleagues have handled this situation? Certainly, you know, we have a lot of ideas, and you can also answer which of the Maslow or what Maslow items were not previously being addressed. So fire off. While you're doing that, I'm looking through some of these comments.
Yeah.
And Kelvin had asked, I work with Kate Bond Middle School in Memphis. I have one more trip. This thing called COVID has gotten in the way of us wrapping up the program, but I am cautiously optimistic that a driving trip to Memphis may occur this fall, assuming there will be anybody in the building. So I'm not seeing too many comments unless I'm missing something. So, all right, well, I guess we can move on. If anyone has anything, whoops, here we go. Thanks, Kim, you saved the day. And Kim, you said as a school counselor, I really look at things through a trauma lens. So I probably would have handled it in a similar way now. Years ago, I would have had no clue how to deal with a situation like this. I think it takes a lot of experience and learning before you get comfortable with uncomfortable situations. Kim, you are spot on.
Yeah.
And in my first book and in my speaking engagements, I talk a lot about, like, I was the king of suspension in St. Louis County. In fact, I probably may still have the record for most suspended days by an elementary administrator early in my career because my toolbox had not too many things in it, you know, and the expectation from my staff then was, this is what's always been done, and if this, then that. And I learned really quickly it wasn't changing the behaviors. So maybe coming up with something else. So thank you for that, Kim. Kelly, do you want to share some of the other comments that they're going through here?
Sure. Catherine says, honestly, my first instinct would be to raise my voice and tell him to stop. However, after some past experiences, I would have lowered my voice, stood at his side versus in front of him, and commiserated. My colleagues would have sent the boy to the school counselor. Very often how educators react is by saying it's to be expected from this child. It often is about children who are labeled. I think that's an important thing to think about, you know, when you start to get into that mindset that it's expected from a child, and maybe those are the times when you need to sit down and start really thinking about what's going on in this child's life, or what are some things that could be triggering these behaviors, what needs aren't being addressed that we need to start looking at. Did you want to add anything to that?
You know, in kind of looking at, and I'll backtrack just a little bit, I don't think you can hear it here. I'm like a bullhorn. So even when I'm talking normally, it can scare someone. And back to that comment about raising the voice, you know, it's kind of like wallpaper, right? You stop noticing after a while. So some of the kids that have had, you know, a parent or someone in their life who's loud or yells or does that, it's almost like they turn that channel off anyway. And I'm all about effectiveness and what will produce the most, you know, the positive outcome. I see on here, colleagues would have sent the boy to the school counselor. You know, I work with a lot of school counselors, and I see plenty of school counselors on our list here. I say all the time, this is pre-COVID even, for us to meet the needs, to meet the Maslow Before Bloom needs, just the needs of the students in an appropriate way, we need like at least a dozen or more counselors and social workers in the building. There's no way that need, you know, you have 500 kids or 600 kids or more, and you have 1.5 counselors. I mean, that is a default answer a lot. Well, I'm just going to send this kid to the counselor or to the principal or somewhere. And I'm looking down the comment on being labeled. That's true. Kelvin has a comment that, you know, it really starts with the adult building the relationship. So sometimes, you know, I've had some of the most amazing teachers work for me who said, hey, Dr. P, can I jump in? Or can you just watch my class for a minute? I want to work with this student, because it's not to say just because someone pulls a bulletin board and has a ruckus in the front hall doesn't mean they're not going to have a ruckus in their classroom. And
Right.
just hearing someone say, can you just cover, or could someone cover for me so I can have this conversation, so that there is that trust and that relationship being built, and then knowing what those triggers are. And even us noticing, even teaching the child themselves, actually teaching the grown-ups in the building what their own triggers are, and telling a kid that when your fists are starting to do this, or your breathing is going fast and your heart rate's going fast, that's the first sign. Because a lot of our kids, when that adrenaline gets poured in and they're out of that window of tolerance, their logic, their critical thinking, their problem solving is gone. Running away from a bear, it's great to have fight or flight. Being in a classroom when it's totally, there's no reason for that body's reaction to go, it's really hard. And a lot of our kids can't even recognize the signs, and they don't know what that is that's happening. I'll just go through a couple other of these really quick. Certainly the emotional aspect is not addressed, absolutely. Let's see, children are basically good behavior given the privilege of a high window of tolerance. Caroline, that is exactly right. I forget who said it, and I wish I remembered. It might have been Stuart Ablin, I think that's who it was, who had said that we're rewarding kids for good behavior and character awards, and I'm not bashing that. I think it's so important. But for some of our kids, they're not even trying. They don't have to do anything. They're literally just showing up for school and doing what's natural, and they're getting rewarded for that when they're kids, that this stuff is so hard because they have such a trauma history. and they're not doing it on purpose, or they haven't learned how to react and even have the right social skills. And things start with, you know, what's perceived as disrespect and escalates so high, both between the adult and the child, and then it becomes bulletin boards flying and microwaves flying and chairs and desks and things. That's so true. Kelvin, I got a comment on this. You know, the bald and the fat thing, you know, I kind of joke about that because the kid said it. Teacher's like, well, he called you bald. And I'm like, so, and he called you fat. And I'm like, okay. The stupid part, I might argue it, but probably standing next to Einstein, maybe we all are lacking in that. And Kim, again, I think you're right that all the staff need to be on the same page, have a team approach. You know, when I was a principal, when I work with teams now, we're trying to come up with that problem solving, that let's agree on where are our norms, what are our expectations, what's our process. Everyone has a voice, but then we all kind of agree that here are the things and what we believe in and what's best for kids, and let's work together. Because it's not to say just because I had the title of principal that I worked great with every person. There are people that the person who may have caused them trauma might look like me or sound like me, and I'm just not going to be the right person for that. And that's great. And even as an administrator, I told people, I'm not going to have all the answers, and I'm not going to be the right fit for every kid or a right staff person. That teamwork is so critical. Let's
I think
see.
that's why it's so, yeah, I think that's why it's so important for us to build the capacity in everyone in the school to be able to do that. And, you know, I always talk about the analogy Q-tip, you know, quit taking it personally. So you need to learn how to detach yourself from some of those situations and know that the kid isn't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time, and just looking at it from a different perspective.
And Kelly, you're spot on, because the majority of times it has nothing to do with us and everything to do with them. It doesn't mean that people don't have their feelings hurt. It doesn't mean that there aren't kids who are so skilled at self-sabotage or so skilled at pushing people's buttons that we have to know what our own limits are. We have to know when we need to tag out and let someone else step in. That doesn't make us a bad educator. That makes us someone who understands our limits. I've worked with teachers back in the day who you could hear them screaming through the wall, that's it, you're suspended, or you're out of my class, or you'll never use a computer again forever. And you're listening, it's like, okay, that's someone who needs to tag out. There's another comment in here about the just hand them over to the counselor. Caroline, I agree with you, because there were kids that teachers would be honest and like, that's a you kid, because the guy before you was Superman. He'd fly in and rescue the damsel in distress and take care of the kid and babysit him all week. And to me, I'm not sure what the kid or that teacher were learning from that situation. Again, someone's disrupting the learning of all the other kids, someone who's just, you know, in such a bad way. There probably is an opportunity for a break from that student, a different setting, to calm everybody down, to bring us back to the table, to figure out what might work. But yeah, the counselor can't. I mean, that kid, they'd have 100 that kids in their office, and I haven't met a counselor with an office big enough for 100 kids. And now socially distancing, they're going to need like Busch Stadium or something to fit all of that. Do you want to move on to the next one, Kelly? Would that work for you?
Of course. So we're going to hopefully be able to talk about 3 more case studies if we have time. The next one is Jimmy and Javon, the leader deep inside of me. Do you want to give us a little synopsis about Jimmy and Javon?
I sure do. So I could definitely spend a long time sharing this, but basically had an older student who was just not making good choices. You know, it was one of those things, you know, thought he might get suspended. And I'm like, no, but you're going to have to find something. Let's think about some way, you know, something for you to do other than this recess thing right now, some way to fix or repair or give back. And the student, I often ask the kids, you know, what do you think? like collect this team problem solving. What do you think? Why don't you come up with an idea and let's see if that's something that makes sense. Usually they come up with something much more harsh than I would come up with. And part of it was, I'll spend some time, I'll give up a recess or two for what I did. That seems like a fair consequence. And, I didn't argue. I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. And he went and helped his former kindergarten teacher, and they paired him up. Teacher had said, it's okay, come work with one of the other students. And honestly, life got in the way. I got busy, 20 other things came up, and kind of just, forgot about it. And in my head was like, I need to check in. And, in passing, got the thumbs up that things were better, and didn't hear much from his teacher, didn't really think about, getting back with the kindergarten teacher again. We're not perfect. Life moves really fast. And it wasn't until some time later that it was time. Like, my body told me, my mind told me, I got to get back in some of these rooms. It's been a while since I've been in kindergarten. My goal was always to put my head into every class every day. And honestly, that didn't always happen. Again, life got in the way. And I happened to notice him in there. And it was kind of puzzling at first, and talked to the teacher in that. And she actually wasn't aware, just kind of thought the consequence was kind of forever. And he was working with the younger student and did such a great job. And it was such a win for the older student, such a win for the younger student. The behaviors improved so much. That is a resource that we have in our buildings that don't require a bond issue or board approval. It's a win-win. And when I do these problem-solving sessions at a school, we'll often do that. You'll hear the name of the 5th grader or something, or the 9th grader, whatever, depending on the age of the building, age of the students in the building. And then the younger one, it's like, well, why can't we try and match these two up? And maybe it's because the younger one needs an older brother, or needs some reading help, or needs someone, that's a 5th grade cool kid or something. And from that, it was like a win-win for both of them. There was no need for a suspension. There were, everyone won from that. Both of them soared. And that's something we should be looking for, all the time, a way of giving back, a way of helping someone else, depending on what the basis or the underlying issue for perhaps the older student. We talk to people that really struggle with anxiety or depression and things. One of the best things for self-care, one of the best ways of treating that, is for people to volunteer and to give back. It really fires off all that good stuff, all those
that joy
endorphins
juice
and everything.
Yeah,
It's just a feel good. And so that stuff really does work. Do you want to share the questions, Kelly?
sure. I've got them up here. What would you have done if you had been in our shoes? Why did this win-win plan work? And what Maslow items were not previously being addressed in Jimmy and Javon's life? And one of the things that, this story reminds me a lot about is when children feel valued, or they feel they have a purpose, and Jimmy really felt that he had a purpose. And that was that Javon, relied on him to come down and read to him. And I remember the beginning of this story, while we're waiting for some things to come in, but the beginning of this story is he was out on the playground, and it was, he went and sat on the picnic table, and you just kind of like was on your phone, pretending like you were doing something on your phone, and you were just waiting for Jimmy to engage in you. You didn't come over there and point a finger, or, it was more of like, I'll wait till you're ready. And he came, and everything kind of just, just went so well. Let's see what we have going on here. Let's see, Kim, I love when students can help each other in this way. She's pre-K to 4th grade. They've done similar things. It works so well in the Jimmy and Javon story, because both kids had a need and they were able to help each other get that need met. So there's other people that can help meet the needs of our kids, and their peers can help them. And I think that's a huge lesson for our kids to learn.
It's interesting, Kelly. I look back at Caroline has a comment about she's been hesitant to try this, been struggling with the idea of how the older child's peers would interact with him or her. Is there a danger of being teased and bullied? And that's an excellent question. In my experience, that really hasn't come up. And there's almost like an added benefit, because just by happenstance, sometimes when you pair them up, it's the guy coming in the hallway, high-fiving his little buddy, or sometimes even end up riding the same bus. And then it's kind of like, hey, my man, come sit by me. And the other kids look, hey, don't mess with them. That's my little brother, my little buddy. So it really does work. And I've really not, often what I end up seeing is another kid, saying, wait, whoa, Jimmy, what you doing down there? Can I help with a little guy? Can I get a little brother? It's just, I've never really seen the bullying of the older kid, and I've seen the added bonus. One school I worked at, we did a multi-age family, and a lot of schools have done things like this with different names, where basically you have a staff person or two, and they have at least one or two students from each grade, and they'll do like a service project, like 4 times a year or something. They'll work together on this. And our hope with that was sort of to have that connection. And as the kids grow out, you bring in, the younger one, and you end up having that. And it kind of teaches, the empathy and the compassion and the family and the teamwork. And it was like, it would bring tears to my eyes when you see like the toughest big dude at school, maybe even he struggled with the behaviors, and like the little 5-year-old, 6-year-old walks by, and the guy comes over, he's like, hey, how are you? And someone looks at you and says, hey, that's my little buddy. Don't mess with them. So I've seen it, usually the other way. Do you want to share some of the other comments, Kelly?
Yeah, let's see, Carolyn, does it require for the, sorry, something else popped up. Does it require for the restorative practice to be explicitly made known to all students? Is it a big question mark, especially when the older children are adolescents and are anyways going through understanding identity? I think, it just depends child by child basis, is really getting to be able to know what, that child needs. And what do you think about that?
And I don't know exactly require for the restorative practice to be explicitly made known to all students. Most of the buildings I worked at, we had that we never had like one program. Like one school I was at, we had Boys Town Social Skills, another one's PBIS, another one we did like a leader thing, another one. And like, I ended up kind of like combining that and working with our leadership team and our staff to come up with, because none of those exactly fit everything that we needed. And one of the pieces that even before we knew what it was called, infused that restorative practice, that restorative piece, infusing a circles and infusing the, fixing the harm done, but also that the perpetrator might also be a victim type thing. We just kind of wove those pieces all together, and it worked. It worked really well. I'm a big time believer of that, and I think the kids, the students appreciate that. It's logical. Yeah, so I think it's a pretty neat thing. I see this comment here that we tried this, all the other kids wanted to have a buddy too. So Kim, you're right. I mean, it's totally true.
Yeah. You want to move on to the next one, or do you want to see if some other things come popping in?
I think we can move to the next one. And folks, anyone out there, if there's a comment, question, otherwise any of these, great. I feel like we always do as teachers. We overplan. We have a lot in here. We're probably going to run out of time really quickly. So we'll just do the best we can, and perhaps offer another one of these in the future if Kelly wants to be my partner again moving forward. So
that would be great. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to, James and Scott. Why can't we knit? Do you want to give us a brief synopsis on this one?
I would love to. I love the boys knitting crew. This is one of my most favorite things. And I, like I say in both books, there are plenty of mistakes made. If you see me in person, I will tell you all the wrong decisions I made, all the bonehead things. And primarily because I hope to help you navigate around that so you don't make the same mistakes I do. But this was one where everybody has that grade. And we hate to say it, but we know that grade. And it's the one that it seems like where all the heavy hitters are. If you study your data, you'll see that it's like everyone has that grade. And moving up, they start getting that reputation. And I don't really like that. It just, the kids know it. And we try and undo that. But I remember really having a problem like in our lunchroom. And it was like a handful of boys, maybe 2 ringleaders, and maybe grew a little out of that were just disrespectful and would throw food and would just, it would literally, they disrupted it for everyone. And there were really great kids in that group, and they were really great kids, but just attention seeking and just looking, you know, for trouble. And I had a talk with them, and I said, you know, it's a requirement that I feed you, right? But it is not a requirement that it's a privilege to be able to eat in the lunchroom. And I said, this isn't working. You know, this is taking up so much time. It's so disruptive. It's kids aren't eating, kids are upset. We're just, you're going to eat somewhere else. You're going to eat with me or someone for a while till we figure this out. And I threw it back on the boys, and it was 2 guys to start with. And I said, so here's the deal. You guys need to come up with a plan on what you're going to do during lunch. You can eat, but you got to do something else, and it's not going to be in the lunchroom. So you figure it out or I figure it out, and, you know, whatever. So one of the boys came back and said, you know, we could knit. Why don't we have like a boys knitting crew? Can we just knit? And I said, I like it. I like that idea a lot. In the back of my head, I'm like, by all means, you know, these kids are flinging everything. I'm going to give them sharp pointed objects. It's like principal of the year right there. Real brilliant idea. So I kind of gave it to them. I said, well, I really want you to figure out what you're going to knit, okay, before we go forward with this. So I think it was like the next day, maybe it was a weekend, the next Monday, one of the boys came in and said, you know, hey, Dr. Pearlman, I know what we want to knit. So my little nephew or niece is in the NICU. He's a preemie. You know what a NICU and a preemie is? And I said, yes, but he didn't listen. He's like, oh, they're little babies. They're little babies with little baby heads. And I was there visiting my niece or nephew, and the nurse was saying, you know, I overheard them saying that they were running out of these little knit hats. So I'd really like to knit, you know, little baby hats for little baby heads. And I thought that was awesome. And we actually happened to have someone within our building, a volunteer, who had knitted things before, crochet. I don't really know the difference. I think it's knitting. And she volunteered to work with them, and they started doing that. And it actually worked. It worked really, really well, to the point where, like that other thing about, you know, the boy being a mentor for another one, everybody wanted to be a part of this. And so it became really, really successful. We delivered these little knit hats, and we'd get like letters, and we had a nurse show up, and like a doctor wrote a letter, and just saying how it is a mom sent, like it meant so much to know, even in this time with this 9 or 10 week early baby, that some boys from the school were knitting these hats so that they would have one. And I mean, it makes me tear up now just in getting little goosebumps just sharing the story. And it kind of goes with this message that I work with schools on now, that it's like, try to change the narrative, make it cool to do the right thing. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. I never had a problem with those boys, again, because for whatever reason, maybe their behaviors were attention seeking, maybe they didn't have a good self-image, maybe whatever it was, they weren't, you know, succeeding in the academic side of our day. I mean, gosh, if you're not good at math and you're not good at reading and writing, you must think you're stupid, you know, like that. Those are the offerings that we have. So it's really changing that narrative. And I wish I could say it was like that. I had that plan from the beginning. I didn't have it planned at all. You know, the boys came up with that. So I just love it. It was just an amazing experience. So Kelly, do you want to share some of the comments or anything, any thoughts with these questions that are on your mind?
Yeah, definitely, you know, when we think about what Maslow items were a part of this chapter, and I just noticed a typo on my slide, so I'm going to fix it. But anyways, you know, it's that whole, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're thinking about belonging. That's such a huge part of feeling that sense of security. And when you belong someplace, and I really think that gave the boys a sense of belonging and purpose too. Let's see. Just involving the children in deciding what they would do, had them come up with such a thoughtful way. That is a powerful story. Changing the narrative, making it cool to do the right thing. And that's from Carolyn. You know, the whole part, especially and you brought it up, you know, with your first book, the whole problem solving process, and how you were able to sit down and really listen to not only, you know, what needs behaviors we're showing you, but listening to being able to think about, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? You know, so you really being able to work through those brain states to get up into that thinking brain to say, okay, now how are we going to fix it? You know, so self-esteem, Carolyn brought up a brilliant way where the children were part of building their own self-esteem. Anything
You
else?
know, I'll chime in for a second. You
Yes.
know, I share in this book, and I believe in my first book, I shared about the morning martial arts, you know, the program that we did. And it's just kind of, it's really not the what we're doing, it's the why, it's the purpose of why we're doing it. It doesn't have to be knitting. It didn't have to be martial arts. It's trying to get kids connected, right? It's trying to connect them to something. I feel like sometimes there's this misunderstanding, or because our situation growing up was different, that we assume every kid has access to Little League, every kid has access to all these resources in the community. And there are a lot of kids that have access to nothing in their community. And just finding out what that need is, finding out a way to connect. You know, if you read on like gangs, like why people join gangs, they join because they're looking, there's something missing, there's something seeking, they're trying to join like a fraternity, they're trying to join like a family. So we can make and I don't want to use the word, but we can make it a good gang, a good gathering, a good reason for them to work together. And just see that, again, for students that may not be great with the reading or the writing or the math, maybe they're great at something else. Maybe they have untapped leadership potential, that because the offerings that we typically have, like we're always going to our go-to person. We're going to that Susie Sunshine, that amazing student who, you know, has been to 14 countries and, you know, is always a superstar. Like we're all guilty of that. Even amongst our staff, we're guilty of going to the same people over and over again, but looking at ways to give students a leadership opportunity. I want to share one more thing. It was like a boy I worked with, and this guru, this character ed sociologist, this guru guy was in our building, and I really struggled with this one boy. Like nothing worked. He had like 3 superintendent suspensions, but before he was in 3rd grade. I mean, this is a pretty hardcore kid, and the message was like, connect him with something, give him more responsibility than he's shown the ability to handle, and he might just surprise you. It's like, you must be crazy. Like you got a degree for this? Because like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I think I pretty well said those words, and come to find out he was right. You know, he's right. Give them a reason to get up in the morning and show up to school and keep their chin up, even if they struggle with reading and math and writing. So are there some other comments in here, or do we want to move on to the next case study?
We can move on. You know, just again, that feeling, sense of belonging is so important. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So here's Billy. This one, I hope you have some good shoes because he's a runner. This one, you want to give us a brief synopsis about this one?
I would love to. Just the funny part of this to begin with, you know, it's the first time I'd ever been hired, when my boss said, you know, I hope you have a good pair of shoes. And I really just kind of smiled it off, because I'm kind of like, maybe I missed something. And learned really quickly in talking with my secretary that we had a runner. I mean, a well-practiced runner. And I remember this building. I don't know whose idea it was to put it where it was, but like immediately adjacent to us was a street. On the other side was like an interstate. You'd have to pass a gas station / liquor store. Then you pass the train tracks, the Merrimack River, truck stop, and then Highway 44. I have no idea whose great idea this was. And this little booger ran for it. And he hopped that fence, and I hopped the fence in my suit, ripped my pants, you know, went chasing after him in my not so good shoes. And, you know, you're running after a student, and cars that are stopping and honking and looking aren't thinking concerned principle. You know, they're thinking stranger danger. So on top of everything else, you know, pulling muscles, you know, sore, you know, got cut from the fence, finally stopped. We had a talk, you know, brought him back. He was running, trying to find his mom, which even just saying this now breaks my heart, because looking at just the surface level and not assuming goodwill first, you know, until proven otherwise, was just a little kid looking for his mom, missed his mom and just was fight or flight and just ran for it. And in this situation, certainly could have sent this kid home, given him a consequence. You eloped from school property. It's got to be in that discipline manual. I mean, that's probably a mandatory 2 days out of school suspension, but instead really thought about that running, and he was fast. And I can tell you that little guy was really fast because it was very hard to catch up with them, but really trying to turn that around. And that was something that was a good release for him and was really good for his self-care and mental health, that we started a running group and then started getting volunteers from the community, a fire person, firefighter, a police officer, even our superintendent would sometimes come and walk and run with him, and really would kind of measure the distance and say, oh, you've run as far as like the zoo, so maybe we got him a little zoo stuffed animal, or as far as an ice cream shop, and got him a little ice cream, something to work towards. And he ran his stuff off. It was planned for him. It was scheduled. He got what he needed, and he didn't elope anymore, which I was very grateful for, because I didn't want to rip another pair of suit pants. And I just don't love jumping fences and chasing after people if I can help it. So it worked really well. And a student, students like this are the ones that we turn that negative attribute. You say, describe a challenging student, and they have all these attributes. This was one, he's fast, is it not in a good way? Well, this student like this was the one that ended up running in school and running for the school team, and then being the first one in his family to go to college on a track and field scholarship. So we can turn that potentially negative behavior into, again, a win-win for everybody, and it just works. And just having that flexibility, having that problem solving, thinking about, like, looking at the behavior, taking a breath, calming down after chasing a kid, or whatever other behavior, and just thinking about what's the missing piece. What is it that their behaviors are telling us that they're lacking, and just doing it. And the other thing that's so weird, whether it's the crochet knitting group, whether it's the martial arts, or whether it's the running club, there are so many people in your community that will help and want to volunteer, want to give back. The problem is they can't read our minds. They don't even know what to do, but it's reaching out and saying, we need some extra hands on deck. Or could have been me grabbing a cool high school kid, and maybe they have time after school or during the school day to come over and run with them. Just looking for those win-wins. We sometimes get so caught up in, what does the discipline manual say, or why is this kid doing this? How do we beat this behavior, figuratively out of them, instead of saying, how do we turn this into a positive? How do we make this a win-win? Do you want to share some of the comments, if there are any, or any of your thoughts, Kelly?
Well, while we wait for some comments to come in about this case study, about Billy, just thinking, like you said, figuring out, well, why does he feel the need to run? Looking at that Maslow, he's looking for safety. He wants his mom, or, being able to know proprioceptive, talking about sensory issues. What does he need to help him feel safe in the space that he's in? And just going back, thinking about that word discipline. We talk a lot about discipline, and really thinking about what it truly means, that, discipline is teaching those missing skills, being able to recognize what those are and what those needs are, and addressing them as well. So I don't see any other comments coming in.
I'll share just a little bit, and then we'll be open for any questions, any situations you want to share. We'll share our contact information and all of that. It's I had this belief because I was that kid. I was the kid that nobody wanted. I overheard them, and I don't fault any of them. I was a handful. Academically, I struggled. I have ADHD. I don't think they had a name for it in the 70s when I had it. It was just hyper Bryan or something. I don't remember. But we have this belief that, sometimes, and we're all guilty of it, this kid's behaviors are awful and horrible and terrible, and we're never going to change them, and nothing works. These big, bold statements. One of the schools that our organization, the nonprofit's working with, is a youth detention facility. And it's basically a youth prison. It's a correctional facility. And some of the behaviors that some of these kids have done are some of the worst behaviors, worst offenses that you can do. And what's really interesting, the director of that program and I went for a tour, and she introduced me to kids, and two of the most delightful kids I met, you know, in their teens, both won, like, they neck and neck every month for who's the character award winner. And like the joke was, like, if the door was left open, these are two would say, yo, the door's open, you know, or someone ran, hey, that guy ran. And like, these are kids that, you know, have pretty extensive records of some pretty horrific behaviors, things that would, you know, be pretty close to life sentences for grown-ups. And the reason I share this is I have to believe that there's not a bad kid out there, that these kids have made some really bad mistakes. One, it was a drug-related offense. One was a pretty serious mental illness that wasn't being treated. Also, both of them with this extensive trauma history. It doesn't excuse the behavior, you know, but that there is the way that even with kids that have exhibited some of the worst behaviors that we as humans could think of, we're still giving back. We're still adding value. We're still, you know, improving who they are. And I'm thinking to myself that if they can do it, any kid can. And it just is like being Sherlock Holmes, you know, that we just haven't, the solution's there, we just haven't solved the puzzle yet. And if we look at it from that we are problem solvers, and we're, you know, detectives, and we're trying to figure out what these puzzle solvers, it changes everything. We play to our strengths rather than blame the kids, rather than taking it personally, rather than let's just up the ante with a worse consequence, right? I'm all about the trying to find that effectiveness and positive outcomes. Kelly, do you want to add into that or share anything?
I have some, one of the questions is, how do you make every situation a win-win? You know, sometimes that's the crux. Then we move beyond behavior management and look at it from a Maslow lens. You know, I think, like you said, how do you make every situation a win-win? And I think it has to do a lot with what you just said about being that Sherlock Holmes and being able to find out that need, or that whatever it is that is triggering a behavior, and helping them fix that. And, you know, a lot of the things that you have, a lot of the tools you put into both of your books, you know, really helps with that. And I think that is a great tool.
And, you know, the thing that, thank you for that, Kelly. The thing that's so important to understand is a garbage intervention might work a few times, and a really good intervention may not work a few times to begin with. It's having the patience. It's trying to implement with fidelity and giving it some time. It's trying to have the student have a voice, because so often I would sit in care team, RTI team, I mean, there's SEL team, IEP determination, all these great, intelligent, accomplished people sitting around coming up with a plan for a kid. And the most important person in that wasn't usually having a seat at the table, right? We have a hypothesis. We have a plan. We want to try something. What's the harm in asking a kid? I'm not suggesting asking them while they're out of their window of tolerance, or while they're red in the face. They're not going to listen anyway. But just having that conversation, having that team, having that relationship, it will help with the win-win. I also want to add something that's so important. You know, I remember back in the day, the teachers you'd have to volunteer a kid. Hey, I want to bring this kid up for our care team or RTI team. And there'd be teachers who tell you candidly, I don't want to bring up another name because I don't want another binder, and I don't want another 100 hours of time. I already have 6 kids I'm working on. That's putting them out of their window of tolerance. That's putting them in a situation where they're not going to be able to think, you know, rationally and be able to do it. It's unrealistic. So you're not going to solve every kid in 5 minutes, but maybe that we do the triage and get the low hanging fruit first. And let's work on that one. And maybe there's a way within that grade level, or if it's middle or high school, within a team, or, you know, whatever the department, and maybe we could cluster them together. You know, hand me that guy. I'll take him and her, and I'll do something, and maybe you'll grab this guy and that. And it's so important to do that. Please understand there is an initial pretty high failure rate with these things, and that's okay. If we go into it expecting that a behavior, kids off task 100 times a week, and if they don't get to 0 in a week, that this is a failure, don't even bother, because that's probably not going to happen. And my stories do tell, but there's a lot of behind the scenes that went into this. There's a lot of teamwork. There are a lot of missteps that happen along the way. It's so worth it, though. It's so worth it to run into a success story years later. It's so worth it just to see someone smiling and succeeding, even in a little way. That's the stuff. That's our job. That's our passion. That's what we got into this. That's our mission. What else would you like to share, Kelly?
And that's a lot of it, and I see, like, in the school I'm at right now, we do a lot of work as a team to help teachers to go in and observe and give suggestions and help them either, collect some data or show them how to have a conversation with the child, to do a problem solving session with them. And it's a team effort. It really is. And it's everyone working together. A lot of the times, our administrators are seeing a lot of the times the ones who are putting out fires or having to deal with a student, where in actuality, sometimes it's nice when, I had an administrator for a while that it worked out so well, because she would come in and she would cover my class, and I would go ahead and work with maybe 2 kids who had a problem at recess, and we would, instead of bringing it into the classroom and there being a problem in the classroom, we were able to figure things out, and because we had that relationship and we had that connection, and so it's just looking at different ways of what works best for your school and your situation. But I think teamwork and all being on the same page is huge. Can't do it all alone, definitely.
No.
And student voice, Carolyn put in there too, just making sure that student voice is valued, bringing them to the table, because a lot of times when students come to the table and they have a voice, they have buy-in, they have that connection.
Totally.
I came up with this idea, I'm going to do it, and it's going to, they're going to help me get through it, and we're going to do it. So
Totally. Well, can you believe an hour has flown by? Maybe we have our contact information and
Yep.
future talks, and there it is. So as I stated at the beginning, and please hear me, I see so many familiar names of people that I know from either meeting in person or communicating with on Twitter or the Facebook group. My number's there, my email's there, my website's there, my Twitter handle's there. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. You're going to connect with so many amazing people who are going to have great resources. Join our Facebook group, which you see there. It's that long string of stuff that basically facebook.com/group/Maslow Before Bloom. Connect with Kelly. It was so amazing when she reached out, and let's give this thing a whirl and let's see what we can do. And we've had a couple of conversations and many emails back and forth. And I'm so inspired by the work that Kelly does, and just such an amazing person that's, like, literally we're in each other's backyards. We're so close to one another. The same invitation goes out, and I see there are people from not only all over the country, but all over the world that are in here, and so many really good ideas. I know some were really into this chat box, and some that are just taking this in and just being a part of it. So nice of you all to join us. So great of you, Kelly, to put this together. My parting words are just do your thing. I wish we had had time to talk about the pandemic. I wish we had time to talk about, other things. That'll be a future day something, but please take care of yourself. Take care of your colleagues, your staff, depending on whatever position you're in. Do that self-care thing, problem solve, and just enjoy it. I'm in schools, but I don't run any anymore. I drive by schools, and I'm so jealous of everybody, just wishing that I could be back in there doing that again. Those are my parting comments. All the people who are there, who attended tonight, are doing amazing thing with their students. Keep up the great work. Kelly, I don't know what your parting comments are, but it's been nothing short of a delight.
Well, thank you. I'm really honored to be able to go through these books with you and with other people, and I look forward to be able to doing it again sometime. So just, lean on each other and be well.
All right, and thanks everyone. We are going to end this thing. You all take care. Kelly, I know I'll see you around. We'll
Yeah.
plan another one and we'll debrief, and you know where to find me if you need anything, okay?
Great. You the same. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.